In today's video, we're going to be talking about 8 advanced tips and tricks for FlutterFlow. Now, I've done several of these kinds of videos in the past, and they always bring a ton of value. Everyone likes them because there's always something for everyone in each of these videos. And I'm more than certain that these tips are going to help to make your apps better, faster, and just a joy to use for your users. And as always, if you're interested in viewing and or cloning the exact app I'm going to be looking at in this video, you will be able to do so from my Patreon page. You will find the link in the description below. The first tip is that you want to implement wait screens. And what exactly are wait screens? Well, if you have an app that's dealing with some kind of external resources, maybe it's getting data from FirestoreDB, or perhaps it's getting data from some external URL, some external website. In other words, if you have a situation where the app needs to get some data and the user might have to wait for a little bit, it's always a good idea to show the user what the app is doing. And so here we have a screen, and we have a list view, and we have a regular card here that's getting one record from a FirestoreDB. Here's my FirestoreDB. I just have URLs that has a short URL and a URL, just 2 fields. Now, if you click on any one of these widgets that has a backend query, you have an option to select a backend query loading widget. So if you expand this, you can select a widget type. So for instance, by default, you don't have anything. So if I run this app, nothing is going to show up in place of this widget before it's fully loaded. But I have an option of picking maybe a project theme loading indicator, something like this, and I can click here and preview it. This is how it's going to look. I can choose a custom loading indicator. I can do a component, so I have to select a component, or I can do an image where I need to upload an image of my choosing. And so for starters, this is always a solid choice. And I can do the same thing with the list view as well. I can pick that as well. And now I can display it. And this is how the app is going to look like to the user when the app is running, but just before it has gotten the data. And so let's go ahead and run this app and take a look at the behavior. Here's our app. Let's say I reload the screen so you can see the loading indicator here. Okay, so you just saw those loading indicators. Okay, those are nice, but there's even a better way of doing it. So if you Google something called skeleton screens, you can learn all about them. And I'm sure you've seen them before in various apps. So here we have a preview of what a skeleton screen looks like. It's essentially showing you where the widgets, where the various widgets, the text, maybe an image, maybe something else, is going to appear on the screen before these actual widgets have data. And this is really the way that you want to build your app. You want to be showing this skeleton screen. Now, there are lots of ways of doing it, but the simplest way of doing it is going back to your app. The method that I recommend is you want to take a screenshot of how the widget is going to appear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot of, let's say, this list widget here. I'm going to select it. Here's my list widget, and you want to delete all the items so that you're just seeing the actual widget without the actual items. And you can easily do that right here. So I can select this. I can come in here and I can do erase. I can do erase right here. I can also do erase text. And now what we have is a placeholder for the actual widget with the text, with the data once the item loads. And so we're going to save this, and we're going to select this list view, and we're going to select image. Okay, and we're going to do asset. We're going to say upload an image, and we're going to select the image that we just created. It's going to upload. There's the preview for it. And so for this, we have the default skeleton. So let's go ahead and reload our test environment here. And you're going to see how the app is loading. So as you can see, you saw the display there. Okay, and you can do the same thing for this as well. Take a screenshot of this. Okay, and then you can simply delete the stuff, delete the items, delete that. Now this is a little different. We are actually showing where the actual text is going to appear, but it's the same idea. We're going to save it. We're going to come back here. We're going to pick an image, And we are going to load the second image right here. Upload this image. This image is uploaded. And let's go ahead and reload the app. Okay, the app is reloading. And there you have it. So for a split second, you saw this widget, but without the text. And that's a really, really nice touch because the user is seeing some kind of progress. It's always a good idea from a UI perspective to constantly show progress to the user. That way, the user is not going to be frustrated that nothing is happening on the screen, and the user is seeing something, some calculations are being made, the app is building a result to what the user asked. So that is the method that I recommend, and it's a very, very simple method, and thankfully, FlutterFlow has the capacity to do that while the app is loading. The next tip that I want to share with you is that if you're building an app for a certain size, for certain types of devices, so maybe you're building a web app, it's not designed to work with mobile devices or tablets, or maybe you're building an app just for mobile devices, okay? If you look at FlutterFlow itself, it says here built in FlutterFlow. And if you try to resize it, you're going to be getting an error message. It's going to say desktop only. And so this is a must if you're building a specific app. Maybe you're building an app that's only to be used as a web app, or maybe you're building an app for tablets only or for mobile only. You want to keep that in mind. And so the app we're building from start to finish as part of our project, that app is going to be meant as a web app only. It's not going to be for mobile. It's not going to be for tablet use. And thankfully, FlutterFlow gives you the capability to check which device the app is running on. So if you pick any of these widgets, so let's say I have here a column, you can go into responsive visibility and you can enable this specific widget and all of its children widgets to be functioning only on specific devices. So let's say I want this column to only be on mobile. I'm just going to deselect it. Now, if I have a column and I want to disable it on mobile, and if I'm previewing this on mobile, meaning like this app is going to be running on mobile, I'm not going to see anything. So the user is not going to see anything if they're running on mobile. A much better way of doing it is that you want to let the user know that they're running it on a device that's not supported. And the way you can do that is by creating a stack, and then you can have two columns, and each column is obviously going to have its own UI with all its sub-widgets and everything like that. But each column is only going to be displayed in certain conditions. And if the user is using the app in an unsupported resolution, meaning that, let's say we're not building for mobile, they're using it in a mobile device, we are going to display a message to them letting them know that they're using it in a situation that is not supported. And so the way you want to do it is you want to wrap your existing column in a stack, and then you want to create another column. So here I have my app. It's just one column. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have another column. And now I have a second column. Now this particular column is only going to be displayed if the user is using it in a mobile mode. If the user is not, then this column is not going to be displayed. This error message is not going to be displayed, and the user is going to see the original column, meaning that if I preview it in an iPad, they're going to see the app. If I preview it in a laptop, they're going to see the app. But if I'm previewing it in a mobile, they're going to see the second column, which is an error message. And so here's our new app. And now we are in a mobile environment. I'm previewing it in a mobile. It says here, you can't view this on mobile. If I pick something else, let's say an iPad, we are going to see the app. If I pick a desktop, we are going to see the app. If I go back to mobile, I'm not going to be able to see an app, and I am seeing an error message, which is customizable. And this is great because the user understands what is happening. The user understands that this is not meant for mobile. Now, the next tip I want to show you is that if you're looking for true real-time behavior in the app, meaning anytime I change the data in my Firestore DB, or I change, or another user changes it while the app is running, those changes are going to be reflected automatically. And this is very, very powerful for real-time behavior in situations where you do not want to refresh the page, you do not want to restart the app, you don't want any of that stored. You want those changes to be automatic. Because the thing with FlutterFlow is that In Flutter, it is very, very easy to make anything in the app to be reactive, meaning that it's going to change automatically. But with FlutterFlow, it's a little bit trickier. Thankfully, the way Firestore DB is implemented with FlutterFlow, those changes are automatic. Whereas if you're using something like local store or anything else, they're not going to be automatic. So here I have an app where I have Firestore DB data. I'm basically getting a collection of data and I'm pulling in those URLs again. And here I have another list where I am pulling a list of cities, which is a local store. Let's go ahead and run this app real quick so that I can show you how it works. Here's our Firestore DB data, and this is our local store data. And so if I go into Firestore DB, and let's say I delete a document with cnn.com, I basically delete it right here. I go back to my app, it's automatically refreshed. This is very, very powerful. Whereas if I go into my local store and I delete, let's say, San Diego, this is not going to be refreshed automatically, and it's not going to be refreshed automatically even if I delete an item or add an item or update an item inside the app. The only type of data that is truly real-time is going to be Firestore DB. So keep that in mind if you're building an app and you want true real-time behavior, which is kind of the goal here, right? You want things to be automatic. You never want to ask the user to reload the app, refresh the pages, or anything like that, because when you refresh the pages, you might lose some state. It's never an optimal situation. And like I said, this is very, very easy to do with Flutter. It's a little bit more complicated to do with FlutterFlow, but thankfully, if you just focus on Firestore DB, you'll be able to achieve exactly that. The next tip I want to share with you is that you should be using Firebase remote config. This is a relatively new feature inside FlutterFlow, and it's a very, very powerful feature. Let me show you exactly what it is. If I go into my Firebase console, I have something called remote config. So if I come in here, I can create config variables that my app during runtime is going to read and is going to use inside the app. So for instance, here I have one variable called color. And this variable is an integer, okay? In this example, it's an integer. It could be a string, it could be true or false, it could be something else. And this color has a value of 2. And so if I go into my app, if I go into settings, I can go into Firebase remote config and configure it. I can turn it on and I can add that variable that I have in my Firebase remote config. So here I just entered the same variable, it's color, type is integer. I also have a default value just in case. But if I go back to my app, what I have here is I have a container, and this container's color is set using that remote config variable. So if I come in here, I have a custom function that essentially gets an integer, and depending on the integer, it sets the color. So if the integer is 0, it's going to be blue. 1 red, 2 is green, or default is just going to be pink. Now, this integer that we are passing to this function is actually a Firebase remote config variable. And so right now that variable is 2. So if I go back into my app and I check what color is going to be 2, I can see 2 is color green. So let's go ahead and reload our app and let's see what color is shown in the screen. And as you can see, we have color green. And if we go back to our Firebase remote config, we are going to see that our value has been fetched 2 times. It was fetched once while I was testing this, and it was fetched again since. Now, what we can do here is we can edit this variable, and I can set it to something else. I can set it to 1 or to 0 or to whatever. I can just hit save. And now what I need to do is publish changes. Now, as soon as those changes are published, our app, while it's running, eventually is going to fetch this new result and it's going to change the behavior of the app. It's not going to be immediate because it does cache it for a certain amount of time. But as the users are running the app, they are enjoying the app, eventually our app is going to fetch this new value and it's going to change the configuration of the app. So this is a very, very powerful feature. You can do conditions, you can do A/B tests. And in the future, I will make a more detailed video on this feature because it's extremely powerful. And really, it's going to change the way you are building your apps, the way you are designing your apps, because you can control the configuration remotely. Very, very powerful feature. But for now, definitely start using this feature if you need to have things that you can control remotely. The next tip has to do with custom code, and that is when you are doing custom code, which is something you'll have to do from time to time. I want to encourage you to use OpenAI, but I want to show you how you can use it. So here I have an app with a list view that's being fed from this custom function. And if I open this custom function, what I'm doing here is that I'm creating a list of 1 to 10 integers. And believe it or not, this list here, which if you're a beginner when it comes to custom code, you may not understand what this list means, was created using AI-generated code. But the first thing that we have to do is we need to define our custom function. So I call this custom function getList. It returns an integer, which is a list of integers. And the argument that we're passing is how many numbers do we want to get back? Do we want a list of 3 integers? Do we want a list of 200 integers? In this case, I'm passing 10, okay? And this is a parameter. And so if I delete this function here, right? If I delete it, all I have is a declaration. I can come in here, I can turn this on, and I can say, return a list of integers. And if I press this, it's going to go ahead and think about it for a moment and hopefully generate a very, very useful function to us. All right, so here's the result. And as you can see, it's smart enough to take into account the argument that we're passing, because we don't want a list of 1,000,000 numbers. We only want a list that's bounded by this argument that we are passing on the first page. And so we got the result here. We're not done yet. If you're not happy with this result, you can press this button and it's going to refresh it again. It's going to think of something else. If you are happy with it, you can click on copy function. It's going to copy it, and now this is inside of your function. Now, the fact of the matter is this is not going to be perfect all the time. In my experience, it's perfect about 60 to 70% of the time. So there are going to be situations where it's going to generate a bunch of code that is not exactly what you want. But the good thing about it is that at least it's going to get you on the right path. In this case, this is exactly what we want. And a quick way to validate this code, even if you're someone that doesn't understand code, has never seen code before, is to go here and add our parameter that we defined on the first tab here. And so if we enter an argument of 10, which means we want a list of 10 items, we can run this and see what kind of list we get back. And so here's our result. We're getting 10 numbers from 0 to 9. And so if you want to change that, we can go back to code and we can do something like this. Return a list of 10 items starting from 1. And if I run that, and here we have another function. We're going to say copy function. This looks like it's going to do the trick. We're going to come here. We're going to run this again. And here we have the result. We have 10 items starting from 1. So as you can see, this works fairly well. And if you're interested in learning about this custom code, really understanding it in depth, understanding what you can do with it, what you can't do with it, even if you're a complete beginner, I'm going to be doing an in-depth masterclass where I'm going to be talking about everything that you need to know when it comes to FlutterFlow and custom code. And that's going to be exclusively available on my Patreon channel. So definitely think about joining if you're not yet a member. And so once we have this list, we can come in here. We can fill it with the items variable, which we are naming here. Now, if you run this app, we should see a list of numbers from 1 to 10. And here's the app, and we are working off this field. So as you can see, this field is being incremented by 1, which are the values from the list that we created using OpenAI. In this next tip, I'm going to show you how you can deduplicate any list very quickly and easily. So here we have an app, and we have a list view. And we are loading this list from our local storage, and the list is called list with duplicates. And if we go into our local storage, we have this list with duplicates. If we open that up, you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, and 6. Now, let's say we want to deduplicate this list, and it doesn't matter if this list is integers, strings, doubles, it doesn't really matter the data type of this list. The point is, we want to deduplicate any list. Well, the way that we do it is that before we pass that list to be displayed, we need to run it through a custom function. This function is called getListRemoveDupes. We are returning an integer, isList is true, which is a list of integers, and we are getting a list that has duplicates. So if you go into code, this is the smallest function you will ever see. And as you can see, we're using something called set. So we're taking this initial list, we are creating a set from it, and then we're converting it back to a list. And a list is a collection of items. So you can have duplicates, you can have just unique elements, but a set can only contain unique elements. It will never have duplicates. So when we convert this list to a set, we are automatically removing duplicates, and then we are converting this new set, which is a list without duplicates, we're converting it back into a list, and then we are returning it. And so if we run this app now, we should not see any duplicates here. And as you can see, we are not seeing that double 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No duplicates, all unique. And like I said, you can use this technique for lists of any types. Integers, strings, doubles, you name it, it's gonna work. It's gonna remove the duplicates from your list. In this next tip, I wanna share with you a way of getting a random item from a list. And so here we have an app, and we have a widget that's designed to contain an item, just a single item, instead of an entire list. And here we just want to display a random item from that list. So we have here a custom function that's working off a list of cities. And if we go in here to our local store, we see that we have a list of cities. And this is basically a list of cities. We got New York, LA, San Francisco, Austin, Chicago. And for whatever reason, we want to display a random city. And so if you take a look at this random function, this random function returns a string, which is not a list, so it's just a single string. And it's taking in a list that is a string of data type string, and it's true that it's a list. So it's a list of strings. And if we go here in the code, and we are using something called random. So if you come here to this test section here, and let's say we create a bunch of items in the list, item 1, let's do item 2, and let's say item 3. If we run this, we should get a random item. And as you can see, we got item 3. If I run this again, I should hopefully get another item. Item 1, okay? And so if I run this app, we should see a random city being displayed in this widget. There we have it. It says New York. If I reload the app, we should hopefully see a different city. It says Chicago. And so you can use this method to get a random value from just about any list. It doesn't matter if it's a list of strings, a list of integers, a list of doubles. It could be any list where you have a situation you want to get a random value. Last but certainly not least, I want to show you a way where you can build a custom widget that can not only read a local state variable, but can also write to a local state variable. And that can be very, very useful in many, many situations. So if I come back here to my local state, I have a local variable, and the default value is Brooklyn. So if I go into my app, I am displaying this local variable. So let's go ahead and run this app. And if I run the app, as you can see, it's displaying that local variable. Now, what if I want to create a custom widget that not only reads the local store variable, but can actually modify that local store variable? And that's going to be very useful in situations where you want your custom widget to talk back to your app, because typically custom widgets are like self-contained apps. They don't really talk back to your FlutterFlow app. But in this case, we can actually communicate not only to our custom widget, but also communicate from the custom widget to our app. Let me show you how it is done. And so I have here a custom widget, and what this custom widget is doing is it's modifying the local variable that we have Brooklyn assigned. So if I go back to our app here and I add that widget somewhere on the screen, so I have this column, let's say I add that custom widget that I created right here. And so what this custom widget is going to do is it's going to modify that local state variable that we have defined with the default value being Brooklyn. And so hopefully when we run the app, not only is the custom widget is going to show that the new value is Miami Beach, for example, but our app is also going to show the new value instead of the old value. So let's run the app and see what happens. And so we ran the app, and not only our custom widget is showing the new value of Miami Beach, but also our app, our FlutterFlow app itself, is showing the new value. Remember that initial value was Brooklyn. So not only, this widget has access to that local variable, but we were also able to modify it and change it from inside the custom widget. Now let me show you how that is done. That is actually very, very easy to do. Now you want to pay attention to this variable right here. It says ff_app_state, and this is FlutterFlow's way of accessing local state. So if I delete all this and I press dot, I'm going to have access to our local variable. So remember, we had list of cities, list with duplicates, local var. These first three are the local state variables that we have defined in our app. So if I want to change local var, just pick local var and assign a new value to it. In this case, Miami Beach. And so when this custom widget runs, not only is it displaying it right here, this part is displaying it, but it's also modifying. In fact, it's modifying it first and then it's displaying the changed value. We can change that around if you want. But the most important thing to understand here is that not only do we have a custom widget that's reading the value, that is fairly easy to do, but we also are modifying the value. And so if you're going to be building custom widgets and you need to interact with your app, you need to talk to the main app, which is going to be the case because you're going to have lots of widgets that are built inside FlutterFlow, but you might also want some kind of custom behavior from the outside. So you might also find some kind of interesting widget from the outside. You're going to implement it, and then you want to talk back to your app. Very, very common scenario if you are doing lots and lots of customizations, and that is a way of doing that. And so those are my 8 advanced tips and tricks designed to make your apps better, more convenient, more interesting, and more useful to your users. I really hope you've gotten value here. And if you're interested in viewing and/or cloning this exact app that has all the 8 examples, that way you can just take a look at the code, see how it works, you can clone it, you can copy the code, you can start building a new app on top of this. You can do so from my Patreon page. On my Patreon page, you're going to get access to all the apps that I build inside FlutterFlow, as well as some of the other no-code app builders. You're going to get access to Q&As, live streams, as well as a future masterclass that I'm going to be covering all the custom code stuff for beginners. So even if you have no experience with custom code, you're going to get a ton of value from this in-depth masterclass that's going to be launching in the near future. We have an awesome community there, and that is an awesome way of supporting the channel and supporting my work. So if you're not yet a member, I really hope to see you there. In any case, if you've gotten value here and you want to see more tips and tricks, you want me to keep making the videos and the series, then I ask you to smash a like, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel. Just let me know somehow that you've gotten value, and that will also let YouTube know to show this video to more people so that more people get value from this content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.